The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is contradicting President Trump when it comes to the threat posed by Russia. Here's what General Dan Kane told Senator Lindsey Graham yesterday on Capitol Hill during testimony alongside Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Is Putin going to stop in Ukraine?
I don't believe he is, sir. I think he'll
What do you
go
think?
until...
What do you think, Secretary? Is he going to stop?
Remains to be seen, Senator.
Well, he says he's not. You know, this is the 30s all over. It doesn't remain to be seen. He tells everybody around what he wants to do.
So to make clear, that's the president's top military advisor suggesting that Vladimir Putin wants to conquer other countries beyond Ukraine. General Kane also refuted some GOP claims that the demonstrations in Los Angeles are a sign that the United States is being invaded by a foreign nation. And that's sort of important because it's that sort of foreign invasion concept that Trump has tried to legally justify some of the deportation moves that his administration is carrying out. But Richard, let's go back to the Ukraine bit about Russia not stopping with Ukraine. We know that, Lindsey Graham also, he's one of the co-sponsors in a bill that now has 80 sponsors, a really tough sanctions bill against Russia that President Trump simply hasn't supported just yet. We know for a decade now, Trump has been very deferential to Putin and has blamed this war almost equally on both Moscow and Kyiv. What does it say to you, though, that his top military advisor was willing, and we haven't seen this much in this administration, to defy him, tell him, no, he's wrong?
That was actually welcome. The purpose of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is to speak truth to power. He came in after C.Q. Brown was, fired by this president. I actually thought this was a good thing, and he's right. And by the way, Vladimir Putin, if he wants to, he could do certain things, say in Lithuania or one of these other countries. And there's a real doubt whether the United States would meet its so-called Article 5 commitment. Attack on one is attack on all in NATO. I think there's real doubt. He doesn't need to conquer a country. What Putin needs to do is expose that the commitment that's at the core of NATO is no longer certain. If he does that, that's the end of NATO as we've known it. So I actually think this is potentially a really big moment. And Jonathan, now what's still missing? Any sign that this administration is prepared to help Ukraine militarily in an open-ended way. Even if these sanctions were to happen on Russia, let's be blunt, that would not be enough to get Vladimir Putin to back off.
So, Richard, off of what you just said with regard to Article 5, with regard to Putin wanting to take over Lithuania at some point and us doing nothing. There's a huge meeting in Ottawa today, many European leaders there. Are we on the verge or are we there? Are we now a nation alone?
Well, essentially we're entering into the post-American era in terms of European security, where our role will go from dominant to something much more junior, and the Europeans are increasingly contemplating a future where they might have to be self-sufficient. There's good aspects of that. There's also really uneasy aspects of that, particularly over the next couple of years. And more broadly, Mike, think about it. The president's announcement on tariffs, this sort of thing, that the United States, whether you want to call it America first, but I actually think, this turns out this president's not isolationist, but we are unilateralist on virtually every issue, whether it's getting out of the Paris climate thing or getting out of the World Health Organization, the unilateral tariffs, moving back from our commitments in Europe. He won't make certain commitments about Taiwan. What we have essentially done is gone from being a predictable great power, there with our allies deterring our foes, to now being an unpredictable power. Much more essentially listening to ourselves and keeping the rest of the world uncertain. And I think what you're beginning to see is American allies adjust to a world in which the United States, after 80 years, is now playing a fundamentally different role.
We'll have much more on the situation in Ukraine a little bit later this hour. But turning